Full and Bloom interview with guitarist Adrian Vandenberg. You can listen to our other interviews with Adrian at fullandbloom.com. Click the links in the description. I read somewhere where Steve had said that he probably wasn't great to tour with, that Steve wasn't great to tour with, but he said that you were incredibly patient. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I know that I'm very, I'm a down-to-earth guy. I'm Dutch, that's what my parents taught me. And Steve was at the peak of his career, and he was very, very eager to prove himself. And I noticed that, and I thought, well, go ahead, because I thought the reason why it worked very well between Steve and me on stage is that our styles are so different that I thought we really complemented each other. And Steve told me several times that he thought so too. So I never look at another guitar player as a competitor, because for me, you can't compete in music, You can compete in sports because you can measure it. The guy's a split second faster than the other guy. But for music for me is about expression, and you can't measure expression, You can say, well, this guy is more my taste than the other guy or whatever. But I don't care. And so Steve was quite busy with proving that he was the next hotshot guitar player. He was pretty present with that. So when somebody does that, I gladly take a step back, because I'm not on stage to prove myself. I'm on stage to press myself. And Steve was great. He was very nice, and we actually got on great during the tour, and we had a lot of fun, which you can see in the Now You're Gone video, for instance. The vibe in the Now You're Gone video in the bus, that is the vibe at the time, and it's all fine by me. When somebody wants to do his thing in a band, and it's another guitar player in this case, I always have the attitude of, go ahead, do whatever you think you should be doing, as long as it works within the band context. And I thought we did a great tour.
I can still remember when that album came out, and I just thought, what is Steve Vai? I just thought it's too over the top for Whitesnake, is what I thought. And listening back, when I was kind of putting things together for this interview, I still thought the same things. He does some cool things, but I did think it was over the top. Now, concerning your hand injury, does this start to develop on the 87 tour?
Yeah, well, actually, I only found out in 1999 what caused it. In 1980 or 81 or something, I had a car crash in Holland that resulted in a whiplash. But in those days, the term whiplash wasn't known yet. I had a very painful neck for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then it subsided a little bit. And I went back to work as a graphic designer. That was my job at the time. And so I kind of forgot about it. When the problem started surfacing, looking back at it, already started surfacing in the Vandenberg days, because I remember the third Vandenberg album in the studio. I remember soaking my right arm in warm water in between solos to keep it relaxed. And I forgot about that. But when I found out that this whole thing, in 1999, I ended up with an American surgeon that I read about, because it appeared that I had 2 neck hernias. And so the first thing when the surgeon saw the x-rays and MRIs, he said, well, you have 2 neck hernias. And do you remember, did you ever fall off a horse or have you been involved in a car crash? And then I thought, oh, geez, that's right. At that point in time, it was already 1999. Yeah, it was 1999. So that was almost 20 years before that, that whiplash. And I forgot about it. And then suddenly I remembered it. I thought, yeah, that's right. So that surgeon took away those 2 neck hernias into operations. Then it's settled down. It was less painful and stuff. And the only thing is that over the years, in between, I developed too much tension in my arm, because like with...
To compensate?
To sports, like if a soccer player or whatever gets an injury, you try to compensate with your other leg, for instance. And in my case, with putting more tension in my arm than you normally should, because you should keep it as relaxed as possible. So that actually took quite a long time to get back to normal, because I had to retrain my way of thinking and the way I use my right arm. But I was just, happy that I finally knew what it was.
So during that, it was so sore after the tour that I'm assuming you couldn't even cut rhythm tracks on Slip of the Tongue?
No, yeah, it happened during the pre-production of the Slip of the Tongue album. One morning, I know exactly what it was, I got up on time to prepare a couple of guitar parts that I wanted to play that day, on the songs that we worked on. And I thought, oh, that feels weird. It's like it was like somebody was holding my wrist, or if that there was like a tight band around my wrist or whatever. I thought, wow, that's strange. So I went to the studio and it was still there. I soaked it in hot water and it was still there. And then I told the guys, I have to take today off because it feels really weird. So I went straight away to an acupuncturist, and then I went to another doctor in town. It was all in Lake Tahoe where we were preparing. So in the end, after about 3 or 4 days, it didn't get any better. And I called my dad in Holland and I said, well, Dad, what do you think? And he said, well, I'll call you back in a couple of hours. So he did. And he said, well, I found a therapist in Holland who is specialized in musicians' problems. He said, maybe it's good to come back to Holland because when it's not getting any better over there, it's better to get treatment from a specialist who is specialized in musicians. So I did. And in the meantime, Dave and I talked about it, and we thought, judging by Steve Vai's performance in Crossroads, in the movie where he was playing a lot bluesier, is playing in Dave Lee Roth's band, we thought he would be like the perfect guy. I think the way it ended up a little bit over the top, and I know that Steve agrees too. What happened was basically they gave Steve the tapes and he recorded his guitar parts in his own studio. So he basically went berserk. He did everything he could to be Steve Vai on that album, and he is, he's an amazing player and amazingly creative, and he's got very much his own style. And whether it fits with Whitesnake, well, not like a glove, basically, because it doesn't have the bluesy type of thing that's always been in Whitesnake. And even though it's a fantastic album, I think, and I'm really proud of the songs that Dave and I come up with for that album, it's a little bit out of the vibe Whitesnake usually has, and has always had. So yeah, it's I wouldn't be surprised if at some point that I would re-record some of the songs with Ronnie Romero or whatever, because I would like to play myself. With Moon Kings, my former band, we played Judgment Day live, and then I had the chance to play it like I played it on our demos, and the way I came up with those parts, and that was more to the point and more. More Whitesnakey.
What blew my mind is on Judgment Day, I looked for the video. There's no video. I thought, wow, to me, that's probably my favorite song on the album. And I thought it was maybe not as upbeat as the record company wanted or something, but I thought it still had up some of that Zeppelin vibe that, say, Still of the Night had. And to me, that's the two songs, Judgment Day, and then I thought Sailing Ships would have made a great single. What do you remember about writing that song, Judgment Day, and then also, do you have any opinion on that, of not having a video done on it?
I agree with that. It was, I didn't think it was the greatest move to come out with Fool for Your Lovin'. That was another redone older Whitesnake song, even though it turned out really nice. But I think that the path that we went with on the 87 album to first release Still of the Night and then come out with a more poppy, accessible song would have been a great move, First to come out with Judgment Day or first come out with Sailing Ships or whatever. So you make like a statement of this is what we're about. And they didn't decide to do that. So I don't know, it's a record company policies, and I wasn't really involved in that bit because I was still in Holland, and I'm really, really proud of those tunes. And Sailing Ships also, with Moon Kings we played Sailing Ships too. It's both Sailing Ships and Judgment Day are in live versions on YouTube with my former band Vandenberg's Moon Kings. Interesting to check it out, because Sailing Ships we did just acoustically, but Judgment Day we played it full blast, like on the record, but then the way I would have liked to record it. It's just. I think, a couple of things didn't go the way they could have done back then. And also, what made a difference as well is that the whole grunge thing started happening. You saw, like a little bit of a change on radio. Nirvana came on, Pearl Jam, all the stuff. And suddenly, our kind of rock wasn't quote-unquote cool anymore or something for radio and television. So, yeah, it was definitely a turning point in MTV world and in radio world, so that didn't exactly help a lot either, and everybody knows that, because a lot of rock bands from the 80s suddenly vanished.
Yeah, but it was still selling. I mean, Warrant released Cherry Pie in 1990, which sold 2 million, so yeah. It was still kind of happening. But really, I just wonder, to me, Judgment Day is just an amazing song. Do you remember anything about writing that?
Oh yeah, very much. David musically came up with that first, and then I made put all the rest with it, the guitar parts and the the themes and all the stuff, and It actually came together very organically, but whenever David and I write together, that it always is very smoothly, and we talked about it a lot, and I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that we have very similar taste backgrounds in our musical. We both really like old blues and soul, and at the same time Zeppelin and Free and Cream, all the stuff from my teenage years. David's a couple of years older, but the guy that lived next door to me was about 5-6 years older than I was, and he had all those cool records, Cream and Zeppelin and all the stuff, and Deep Purple, and so yeah, I stoked it up because in my parents' house, all that was played was jazz and classical music, because my sister is a classical pianist and my dad played jazz and classical. So the boy next door, he had all this cool stuff. So yeah, we have those same influences. So we write very well together, and that's how all those cool songs came together. Also for the Restless Heart album that got kind of snowed in because that was 1987. Yeah, that was a little bit toned down, that album, because that was definitely in the middle of the whole grunge thing. Decided to go back a little bit more to the organic, bluesy Whitesnake vibe.
When you and David write together, were you, we talked about your songwriting process last time, but is he kind of just, say you come up with a part and he's just quickly kind of almost freestyling a melody over it and then hammers words in later? Is that how you guys wrote together?
That's usually how it works. You start to sing over, and sometimes I have like melody ideas, for the song, and then he takes bits and pieces of that he likes, and yeah, you're basically kind of puzzling together, in a way, and you both know when it feels right, when it does come together in an organic way, and it feels right. You kind of look at each other, you go, that works.
Anything stand out on writing Sailing Ships when you guys wrote that?
Well, yeah, because the acoustic theme that was originally acoustic, Steve played it on a sitar type of guitar, but if you listen to the version on the first Moon Kings album, actually I made a version of it too, but without the electric bit. I made it more acoustic because otherwise it wouldn't make sense, But I started out with an acoustic bit that I actually wrote to please my mom, because my mom always said, Adrian, on the next album, are you going to play acoustic guitar? Because the rest is too loud. And so I always, ever since my very first band Teaser, when I was in my late teens, I was 18 or 19 or something, I always combined acoustic and electric guitars for my ballads and stuff. And so with this one, I wrote that acoustic little thing to please my mom. And it was on one of the cassettes that I took with me when I went back to David in America to work on the songs. And he said, oh, what's that? I said, well, it's an acoustic little ditty that I basically wrote for my mom. And he said, well, would you mind if I put a vocal line on it? I said, no, go ahead, So he did. It sounded great. And then I came up with the big electric part after that, when the break comes and the whole thing bursts into an electric thing. So I added that to the acoustic bit, and David came up with a melody line, vocal melody on top of that again. So yeah, like I said, it always went really smoothly, and you just try to get the best out of each other's ideas.
I thought that would have been a great final single.
I agree.
That's an amazing song, and it would have made a cool video too.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I thought it was a little bit of a missed chance to. They focused, Geffen Records focused on the radio-friendly songs, like Fool for Your Loving and Now You're Gone, one of my favorites, but it's like an accessible radio song. Like one of the strong points of Whitesnake was always, the epic songs like Still of the Night and Sailing Ships and Judgment Day, that was the stuff that definitely set us apart from bands like Red and Warrant, the more typical American rock radio bands, and those epic songs, that was definitely very Whitesnake.
Yeah, it almost feels like the record company just kept trying to catch the momentum from the last record rather than look at Slip of the Tongue as its own entity.
Yeah, I agree. It's I think it definitely would have been better to come up with like a very epic video for Judgment Day or for Sailing Ships and make a whole story out of it. But basically what they did with Still of the Night was really cool, to have like a half performance, half other stuff. But Sailing Ships and Judgment Day are so scenic. I have all kinds of images popping up in my head when I listen to those songs again. I would love, to make a video for that stuff, and you can make something really interesting out of it.
Did you know by the end of that tour cycle that David was going to end the band?
Well, he had a lot of problems in his private life at the moment in time. So initially, he wanted to take a little bit of a hiatus, which was fine by me, because we really worked our asses off in those years. And he felt for a while, because of him being tired and the problems in his private life, that this was going to be a longer time off. Then a couple of years later, actually 1 or 2 years later or something, the Jimmy Page thing came up. And apparently, initially, when we talked on the phone, he was expecting them to go touring for a year or 2 years or whatever. But they ended up only doing a couple of Japanese shows, and then it was over. So when he called me up to start up Whitesnake again, I was involved with Manic Eden that Rudy and Tommy and I put together with Ron Young, and we made a great album. It's going to be released pretty soon because I'm still very proud of it.
Oh, nice.
So that was very difficult for me because I thought, well, either I'm going to go on with Manic Eden, but at the same time I realized I have been in all those glorious years with Whitesnake, but I never played on one of those albums myself. Because that was before 1997. This was in 1992 or 3 or something. So I had to make a difficult decision in 94, just when we were making a lot of touring plans with Manic Eden. I had to make a very difficult decision and to rejoin Whitesnake very much for that reason, that I wanted to play on the Whitesnake album that I wrote with David, So a very difficult decision to step out of the Manic Eden project because it was a fucking great album and a great band and with a great vibe. So I would have loved to go tour, but you can only do one thing at a time.
Is the Manic Eden album coming out in 2021?
Yeah, Mascot is going to re-release it.
Very nice. Do you know at what point of the year or when it's coming out?
I don't know. That's gonna be decided in the next month or so.
Okay.
I suppose it's going to come out somewhere first half of the year or something.
Is there any reason you're not in Whitesnake nowadays?
Well, yeah, David and I have always kept in touch, but when we were doing really well with Vandenberg's Moon Kings the last couple of years, but the problem was that I think we talked about last time that Jan the singer couldn't do any touring outside of Holland because he's got this big farming company. That was getting on my nerves a little bit because I really love touring all over the world, and I had no other choice than to put together a new thing, which turned into Vandenberg. And so I just keep going, and David just keeps going too. Who knows? Sooner or later we may end up doing something together again or not. I don't know. But right now I'm just really focused on Vandenberg 2020, extremely happy with his album. This is a lot of people actually have been asking me over the years about the frustration of not having been able to play on the slip of the tongue, and they go, we're so curious how it would have sounded. And today I can tell him, it would have sounded like the approach on Vandenberg 2020. That's how I wrote those songs, and that's what I had in mind as far as the sound goes,
Do you think there could ever be a reunion of the 87 or 89 touring lineups?
I don't know. I thought it would have been a great opportunity when the 1990 album came out. It would have been 30 years ago. So I remember suggesting to David, wouldn't it be a great thing to celebrate the 30-year anniversary by doing like a tour with that lineup? And David didn't sound excited about it, so I just let it go. But I thought it would have been fantastic, to do a Slip of a Tongue tour, with Steve and Rudy and Tommy, and I'm sure everybody would have been excited.